My name's Alex. I come from a broken home, ruled by a domineering mother and her nosy sisters. Megan, the oldest, had 13 years on me, and Anna was a decade older. Looks like I was the accident nobody planned on, the reason they say my folks split up. Dad took off in a 77 when I was just 5 and never looked back. Growing up, I got my share of knocks, from bullies at school to rough treatment at home. All I ever wanted was a bit of warmth from my mom, a nod, a smile, something. It never came. But despite the rough start, I made the grade, hitting the books hard for 12 years. Fast forward to 1993, and there I was at Kingston University in South London, more than ready to ditch the drama back home. That's when Holly came into the picture. She was all class and charisma, while I was just a shy guy trying not to get noticed. Holly was wrapping up her creative writing degree, a stark contrast to my dive into mechanical engineering and design. I didn't have the guts to talk to her. She had admirers lining up, while I kept to the shadows. Then, at some bash, one of Holly's pals chatted me up, and before I knew it, Holly was part of the conversation. I wasn't much with women, but something about my shy vibe caught her interest. I managed to ask her out, and we started seeing each other. I'll be straight. I was green, and she was my first. But about 6 months in, word got around that she might be seeing other guys. I didn't have the nerve to call her out on it. Holly was the pampered type, always getting her way thanks to her folks and her sister Caroline. That made things tough between us. She had a knack for stirring up trouble in public, leaving me red-faced. My buddies told me to cut her loose, but by then, I was too far gone. I was in love for the first time in my life. After we got our diplomas, Holly and I snagged jobs and a place on the outskirts of Southampton, New Hampshire. Her family was there, and since I'd cut ties with mine, it seemed as good a place as any. We tied the knot a year later and soon welcomed our daughter, Sophie, with Ava following a couple years after. Holly took to motherhood like a duck to water, and for a while, everything seemed just about perfect. As the years rolled on, I climbed the ladder at Walker Engineering, landing there a decade back. The extra cash and bonuses meant we could think about upgrading to a bigger place. But then came the crash of 2008. Jobs were dropping like flies, and scoring new contracts got tougher. We were burning the candle at both ends for no extra dough. That's when I found out Holly was seeing someone from back in our college days. I was too wrapped up in work to see the signs until it hit me square in the face. Toby, an old classmate, turned up nearby, and I started putting two and two together. Confronting Holly didn't do much good. She just laughed it off. But I knew better. Still, with my job steady and the paycheck solid, I was in a good spot to invest in a decent place. Holly kept nagging about getting a house that matched our status, whatever that meant. Despite my doubts, I went along with it, and we ended up with a nice 5-bedroom spot in Southampton. The market was on our side, so we got a decent deal even with the steep mortgage. I did something out of character. I opened a savings account just for me, stashing my bonus there. Since I handled all the financial stuff and Holly hardly glanced at the accounts, she probably didn't even know about it. Looking back, setting aside that money was the sharpest move I ever made. I needed a safety net. Holly's old flame could flicker back to life at any moment, and who knew where that would leave me? After the dust settled from that scare, life leveled out again. My girls were my world. I was all in on backing their schooling and filling our weekends with dance recitals, concerts, and zoo trips. Meanwhile, Holly was too tied up with her own crowd, her indulgent, idle friends. I didn't mix much with other husbands, but we all seemed a bit henpecked. My pals would rib me with the Rolling Stones under my thumb when Holly's plans scuttled mine. Even the guys at work had their digs about her hold over me. Things really came to a boil a few months back. With Ava heading off to the same university as her sister, it was just me and Holly for the first time in 18 years. Dropping Ava off at her new digs, she hit me with something heavy, her voice low. "Why are you still with Mom?" I was floored. Ava was usually quiet, kept things close. Then she dropped another bomb. "I heard she's messing around with Henry Walker from your office." Her eyes were brimming with tears. That was news to me, but it didn't exactly shock me. I had chances over the years to dig into her sidesteps, but held back. I didn't want to split our family or have the girls look at me the way they did their granddad. I put up with her stepping out because, foolish as it might sound, I couldn't stand to wreck what we'd built together, even though I still loved her. This bombshell rattled me deep. First off, it showed me just how much my daughters despised their mother, more than I'd ever realized. Then, it dredged up all those old feelings from my own messed-up childhood, spotlighting my weak spots. And the kicker, I was the butt of the joke at work. thanks to Henry Walker, the boss's nephew, and the very snake betraying me. I was a wreck, unable to bear the strain, especially knowing my youngest was hip to the cruel jokes Holly spawned. I knew I had to face her. My heart hammered as I waited at the kitchen table, dreading her return. When she walked in, all I could do was sit frozen. She just gave me this look, part apathy, part scorn, as she unloaded her shopping. Finally, I found my voice. I asked her straight up about her messing around. She brushed it off, said it wasn't an affair, nothing big. My gut twisted as I waited for some kind of excuse from her. She tossed me a bone, said she respected me as a provider, as a friend, but I wasn't meeting all her needs. Flabbergasted, I pressed her. "Are you cheating on me then?" Holly's answer floored me. "It was just physical," she said. "Nothing of the heart or mind involved. She even had the nerve to casually add that she'd been seeing younger guys." I lost it a bit then, raised my voice, demanded she make sense of it all. She shushed me, cool as you please, admitting to not one but two affairs, and expected me to just swallow that. She laid it on thick, saying either I get with the program or she walks. Find someone who will. My face must have been a mask of pain, but silence was all I could muster. She tried to justify her flings, claiming it's what all her friends did, even said it could spice up a marriage. I was disgusted, couldn't believe she'd use her friends' low standards as an excuse. When I threw out the idea of me stepping out, she just laughed, said I didn't have the chops to pull it off with another woman. The scorn in her laugh echoed in my head, mocking as I sat there, stung and speechless. She firmly declared that our relationship would continue on her conditions, cautioning me not to spoil a good thing. In truth, she was correct. Throughout our 22-year relationship, I had shown unwavering devotion and compliance with her demands. Now, everyone was aware I was being cheated on, damaging my reputation among friends and colleagues. The following morning, I walked into my office and met Henry Walker, the man involved with my wife. With a grin, he asked about Alex's well-being, his confident look increasing my annoyance. I decided to keep quiet. By the coffee machine, I overheard some men laughing. Despite their laughter, I walked by them, feeling vulnerable. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, appeared to enjoy my predicament. Sitting at my desk, I reflected on the tough start to my day, feeling mocked at both work and home. Despite trying to concentrate, my anger persisted. I chose to investigate my father's history, knowing only where he was born, and his leaving at 38 in 1977. Looking up family history sites for Cambridgeshire, I identified a few likely matches. Expecting that he had passed away before my college years, I narrowed it to 3 possibilities and posted questions on genealogy websites. Lost in thought, my boss, Jack, called me into his office. Jack, a successful yet ethically dubious man, wanted to discuss something. Although I thought about quitting because of his actions, his persuasive nature and high salary kept me there. I found out he was having an affair with his secretary, Olivia, unknown to his third wife. He straightforwardly brought up rumors of my wife's unfaithfulness. I responded by mentioning her affair with my nephew. He acknowledged this behavior, laughing about the family tendency to be scoundrels, leaving me speechless. The conversation turned to work matters. He stressed the importance of family and cautioned that if my personal problems impacted the business, I might need to leave the company. His tone was like a strict teacher reprimanding a student. I bit my lip and noticed Olivia, his keen secretary, standing by the door, probably collecting gossip for her friends. As I started to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would get involved with an older man like Jack Walker. Walking past her, I heard more snickers, which made me bow my head and walk faster. Laughter followed me out the door, obviously at my expense. Back in my office, I felt pointless being there. I had paid for my daughter's education, but now it seemed I was just funding my wife's cheating. I'm a simple man who likes his gadgets but can do without luxury. Most of my money went to Holly's luxuries, making me question my own happiness. This office used to be my sanctuary for creativity and achievement. I had created many of the parts we produced and sold here, and I felt sure I could get a job elsewhere. They thought of me as weak, and they weren't entirely wrong. I wasn't one to cause trouble. I preferred to be good old Alex, the submissive engineer. Looking at my screensaver of a family vacation, I opened my email. To my surprise, there was an email from a woman named Jennifer Holmes from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. Shocked by the swift reply, I read her message with amazement. Jennifer had seen my post about my father and connected with a woman claiming to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I quickly responded with my contact details, eager to hear from Rachel soon. Leaving work was like a breath of fresh air. I got home to find Holly, smiling as she stirred a pot on the stove. Although I felt like keeping to myself, the aroma from the kitchen pulled me in. As we sat down to eat, Holly's voice softened. "Can we talk about last night?" I paused, fork in hand. "It feels like you've already decided everything," I replied, thinking there wasn't much left to say. Her eyes filled with urgency. "Please don't cut me off. I know I've been unfair," she admitted, her voice almost breaking. "But don't give up on us yet." The words stung. "How can I just overlook everything? Tell me how," I demanded, searching her face for any trace of sincerity. She looked away, shrugging helplessly. I don't have a good explanation." That moment, my patience wore thin. I thought about all the times I'd worked late, sacrificing my wants for our needs, driving an old car so she could have the new one. And for what? To be laughed at behind my back? Holly's voice cut through my thoughts. "I have needs you're not meeting," she confessed bluntly. "Either you deal with that, or I'll find someone who can." I was quick to respond, anger bubbling up. "Like Henry Walker? Don't think I haven't noticed." She didn't flinch. "Yes, Henry. He'll soon be in charge at work, and he's promised to look after me if you won't." I stood abruptly, the chair screeching back. Without a word, I left the table and retreated to my study, my heart heavy and my mind racing. As tears threatened, the phone rang. On the other end was Rachel, her voice a soothing balm. We talked for nearly an hour. By the time we hung up, I felt a surprising smile spread across my face, the night's weight lifting just a little. As usual, I stayed silent, stood up, and walked to my study. Tears rolled down my face as I wished to be anywhere else. Then the phone rang. It was Rachel on the other end, her voice unfamiliar yet comforting. We talked for an hour, and by the time we hung up, I couldn't help but smile. Everything else just melted away. Rachel was excited that I was finally ready to learn about my dad's past. She revealed painful truths. My mom had kicked him out when I was a kid, lying to me all those years. He died back in 1983 from alcohol poisoning. My grandma always said my mom drove him to it. Rachel shared that he'd always wanted to reconnect with me but was never allowed. We planned to meet at her place in Cambridge over the weekend. I looked forward to the break. The rest of the week crawled by, nothing changed at home, and work was just as harsh. Henry and his buddies thought it was funny to hang underwear on my office door. I saw Olivia glance my way, but she said nothing. Stuck to the underwear was a note. "Please return to your wife." I broke down again, right there at my desk. I blamed everyone but me. Finally, Saturday arrived. I told Holly I was going to see a friend in London. She didn't seem to care. I figured she'd probably see someone else while I was gone, but that made leaving easier. The drive to Cambridge was stressful, and I got there an hour late. But Rachel greeted me with the warmest hug I'd had in years, like the delay didn't matter. I met her husband Greg and their kids, Grace and William. We spent the day talking about my dad and this new side of my family I was just starting to know. Rachel and Greg's warmth was contagious as they chatted away, often finishing each other's sentences. They were eager to unfold our family's story, joined by my cousin David and Lucy Price, Rachel's brother. We instantly clicked, sharing stories and insights about my dad and our shared history. After a hearty lunch, we took a brief trip that gave me some much-needed space to think. Back at Rachel's, David and I got into deeper conversations about work and family life. Surprisingly, I found myself opening up to them, and they didn't hold back in their support, urging me not to put up with my current struggles. Leaving Cambridge, I felt like I was seeing things in a new light. The sincerity and kindness of my newfound relatives restored my hope after facing so much deception and mistreatment. It hit me hard. I needed to find happiness not just for myself, but also for my daughters, my friends, and this new family I was just beginning to know. I got home at 8 p.m. to find Holly getting ready for a night out. "What are your plans tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She was halfway through her makeup. "Just out with friends," she replied casually. Then, catching her off guard, I brought up Max, her other affair. She sighed, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. "Can we not do this now?" she snapped, clearly not caring how I felt. I stood my ground. "Stop this. Be my wife," I implored. She brushed off my concerns with a wave of her hand. "I am your wife, and I will be back by midnight," she said, promising an easy life if I just let her have her fun. As she tried to hug me, I stepped back. Undeterred, she grabbed her Prada bag and headed for the door. In a final attempt, I spoke firmly. "Don't go." She paused, turned to face me, and laughed. "And what will you do? You'll never leave." "You need me," she taunted, confident that I wouldn't stand up to her. As she left, Laughter still echoing, my heart sank. I realized how long I'd played the fool, putting her needs above my own. But that night, something changed. I was done playing her games. It was time to plan a new start, for my own sake. I didn't waste a second. Holly was out, probably with Henry or Max, maybe both. It seemed she was really living up to her word about indulging her desires. The thought of it fueled my anger and pushed me to make a change. I knew I had to cut any remaining ties of affection I felt for her. Digging through old boxes, I found the one photo I had of my mom and sisters. With a mix of skepticism and resolve, I cut out Holly's smirking face from another picture and pasted it alongside them on the photo. I had no love left for any of them, and this symbolic act felt like severing the final emotional string. At 12:45 a.m., I placed the altered photo on my desk, task complete. By then, I had mostly mapped out my immediate future, even though putting my plans into action would take some weeks. Holly had no clue I was planning to leave, which gave me the time I needed. Suddenly, I heard the clumsy sound of someone at the door. Peering out, I saw Henry Walker making a quick exit. As Holly stumbled up the stairs, I erased my browsing history and decided to only use incognito mode from then on. Once she was in our bedroom, I went downstairs to make some coffee, thinking hard about my life ahead, how I could manage without my daughters around. It seemed bearable now. Come Monday morning, I decided to move closer to my daughters. At work, I didn't bother with the usual efforts. Ignoring the snide remarks and laughter, I scheduled a bank meeting for 1 p.m. and spent the morning going over my finances. It was a risk, but with the right moves and a bit of luck, I was confident I'd come out of this relatively unscathed. The meeting went exactly as I'd hoped, allowing me to close my personal savings account and withdraw my name from our joint one. With a substantial amount of cash now in my possession, I shut down that savings account for good. On my way back to the office, I made a stop at PC World, where I picked up a couple of digital voice recorders, a rugged 500 gigabyte USB 3.0 external drive, and a new hard drive for my PC. Back at work, I faced the task of breaking into the company's private customer files. It took me a solid hour to crack Jack's password. Ironically, it was just his wife's name followed by his birthday. Once in, I transferred all the files to my external drive, including my designs for an energy-efficient hydraulic pump system that promised to keep the company competitive. Our company made pumps for everything from air conditioners and heavy machinery to equipment for the dairy industry. After I finished, I wiped my PC's history, replaced the old hard drive with the new one, and reinstalled Windows. For the rest of the day, I sat discreetly researching competitors on my phone and looked up engineering jobs in the South London, Surrey area on Monster. That evening, after another silent dinner with Holly, I retreated to my study. A job posting caught my eye. A major competitor, recently hit hard by the financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer. The role was a bit of a step down, both in responsibility and salary, about £10,000 less than what I currently earned. But it was a viable lead. I sent them my CV right away. Despite everything, I made the choice to maintain appearances with Holly. That night, I lay next to her in our marital bed, quietly planning my escape. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed. Her touch made my skin crawl, but strangely, I was glad to feel this way. It confirmed that my feelings for her had changed, which would only help me move on. The next morning brought an unexpected call from Robert Williams at Sutton Hydraulics. He was shocked that I might leave the much larger Walker Engineering for his smaller outfit. He was nearly ready to hire me on the spot, but I insisted on an interview. We set it for the following day. Things were falling into place faster than I had anticipated. With some breathing room, I started looking for flats near my daughters. I found a promising one just 15 minutes from their place and only 5 minutes from what could be my new job. I arranged to see it right after my interview with Robert. Later, I casually mentioned to Jack at work that I needed to visit my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers. He agreed without a second thought. That evening, I called my old friend Toby Brown and set up a time to meet him and his wife Sarah after my busy day tomorrow. Toby and Sarah, sensing that I was wrestling with something big, were all ears when I arrived. Before seeing them, I had a talk with my daughters about everything that was happening. Their supportive words bolstered my resolve, readying me for the next steps. At the gathering with Toby and Sarah, I laid out the initial steps of my plan. They were more surprised by my decision to take action than by Holly's betrayal, which they seemed to view as just another sad fact of life. Sarah, always the gracious host, offered me another cup of tea as she asked about my plans to leave Holly. I shared the eye-opening stories from my meeting with my cousins, how my mom drove my dad out of the house, and my sisters sided with her. Unlike back then, my daughters were on my side this time. Toby looked worried as he asked whether it was really the family meeting that spurred me to take a stand. I explained that it was actually during a visit to my dad's grave that I made up my mind. Something on the gravestone caught my eye and shook me deeply. "What did you see on the stone?" they both asked in unison. I told them about the rose engraved on the stone, under which were the words, "In loving memory," followed by my father's birth date and his age at death, which struck me hard, as it was my age now. Toby and Sarah leaned back, a mix of understanding and alarm on their faces. I went on saying, "I realized I was at a crossroads. I could drown in my sorrows or stand up and change my path. I chose not to end up like my father." I admitted how exhausted I was from trying to be the perfect husband, only to be met with disrespect and humiliation. Sharing this made me feel exposed, yet it lifted a weight off my shoulders. Sarah, ever the fighter, immediately offered her support, and even shared her own scheme to deal with Holly. I couldn't help but smile at her fierce spirit, grateful for her support despite once doubting her loyalty. The room grew tense with anticipation as Sarah leaned in, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "We need a plan that not only frees you, but also makes Holly realize she can't just walk over people. It's about setting a precedent, not just for us, but for your daughters too." Toby, typically the voice of caution, nodded slowly. "You're right, but let's be smart about this. We're not just dealing with Holly. We're up against years of built-up grievances and twisted loyalties. Whatever we do, it needs to be watertight." I felt a surge of resolve, fueled by their words. This isn't just for me, it's for my dad, who never got the chance to right his wrongs, and for my children, who shouldn't have to witness their father's spirit crushed. Sarah reached out, placing her hand on mine. "Then let's begin. Tomorrow, we start crafting your future, one where you're not just surviving, but thriving." Then I laid out my financial moves. Back in 2008, I started a separate savings account, putting in all my bonuses and extra money I got. This helped me apply for a mortgage just under my name, which made things simpler. I explained how Toby would help by setting up a new company to take over my house's mortgage and handle all the paperwork with the land registry. Toby was unsure about this whole setup, but I calmed him down. "Holly won't be able to fight this," I told him. Her parents, who are very religious, wouldn't back her up after finding out she cheated. They'd stick to their principles. They even offered to help with the mortgage payments so I could put them off for a while. On my way home, I stopped by the local Land Rover dealership to work out a deal. I talked them into taking Holly's old car back and swapping it for the latest model. We closed out the payment plan on her old Range Rover Sport, which worked out great for the dealership since they could sell it again as almost new. I made sure to let the dealer know I'd be back to upgrade my own ride soon. They were pretty happy about the prospect of selling me a pricey new Range Rover. After picking up a 2016 brochure from the dealership, not for myself but for Holly, I headed home. She was lounging, looking tired, coffee in hand. Dropping my jacket and bag by the door, I joined her on the couch. "I want the best for you," I said, handing her the brochure. "I'm getting you a new 2017 model." It was more than just a car swap. It was about shifting gears in our lives, aiming for honesty and a fresh start. Her face lit up at the idea of the new car, clueless about the full scope of my plan. "You always know how to cheer me up," she said, though she frowned a bit about one issue. "They've already found a buyer for my old car. I need to drop it off at the dealership by Friday. I'll leave work early." Then, with a sharp tone, she added, "Maybe you can use my car over the weekend to see your lovers." Her words hung in the air, her smile dropping into a look of shock and confusion as she realized what she'd just said. "What's wrong?" I probed, urging her to explain her outburst. She didn't specify, but hesitated before asking, "Are you still upset about our arrangement?" I kept my response clear and firm. "It's not our arrangement, Holly, it's yours. Did you think I had no choice but to accept it?" Her nod told me everything. She thought she was in control. She quickly added, "But I do love you," her tone filled with a mix of defiance and concern. I didn't reply, walking away to the kitchen as my phone rang. Stepping out into the garden, I answered. It was Toby confirming the funds had been transferred. Everything was set for tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into the bank and met with the mortgage specialist. An hour later, my mortgage was fully paid, and I closed all my accounts. Just a few doors down, I opened a new account at a different bank, relieved yet cautious. I was all set, free from any financial ties to Holly unless she took legal action. As I left the bank, my relief was tinged with a shadow of concern. The next morning, I was on my computer sorting out the final details. I filed an online application at the land registry, entering all the specifics of Toby and Sarah's new company. Within 10 minutes, I received an email confirmation. It would take 3 to 5 days to process. Once approved, I would hand over the deeds to Toby so he could register the property under his company's name. Later that day, I found myself standing at Jack's door. It was Friday, and as usual, Olivia was there. I could tell I had interrupted something between them because she quickly excused herself and left us alone. I didn't waste a moment. I placed my resignation letter on his desk. Jack looked up, that annoying smirk of his spreading across his face. "What's this?" he asked, nodding at the document. "It's my resignation," I stated firmly. "It's best I leave now, given everything that's going on with our families. You probably don't want me around much longer anyway." Jack's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of complete surprise. "I need my P45 by Monday," I continued, "and make sure you don't talk about my leaving to anyone outside Holly's circle." He started to protest, saying how much they needed me at the office. "Yeah? Seems like you need your nephew more," I shot back. I told him I'd be back Monday to pick up my stuff. While bending over as if to pick up a dropped pin, I secretly took a digital recorder from my sock. I quickly crafted a makeshift holder for it, hit record, and tucked it into the wooden frame under the seat. Wrapping up the conversation, I stood. "I've got things to do," I said, heading towards the door. Just before exiting, I turned back and threw one last comment over my shoulder. "And don't bother coming crawling back when you're broke. Seems like your money is the only reason your cheating wife sticks around." His face reddened, a clear sign my words had struck deep. With a satisfied smile, I walked out of his office, closing the door on that chapter of my life. An hour later, I found myself driving home after dropping off Holly's car and the logbook at the dealership. John Reeves, the dealer, kindly offered me a lift back, which I gratefully accepted. When I walked into the kitchen that night, I found Holly sitting at the table, her eyes swollen and red from crying. "What happened?" I asked, concerned despite everything. She hesitated, then dropped the bombshell. "I've contracted gonorrhea." I couldn't help it. I laughed out loud. It was bitter, uncontrollable laughter. She just glared at me, her eyes fiery with hurt and anger. She mentioned taking medication to get better, her voice cold and distant. The tension hung heavy between us. But that night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next morning felt like a new beginning. After a refreshing night in the spare room, I tiptoed into our bedroom and gently woke Holly. "I thought you might need some space to rest," I explained softly. Holly's voice was shaky. "You must think I'm disgusting," she said, not looking at me. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted her mistakes. "I really messed up," she sobbed. "I love you, and I just want you to be okay." For a moment, a flicker of sympathy crossed my heart, but it vanished almost instantly. That surprised me. Standing there, looking at the woman I had been with for 21 years, I realized my feelings for her had completely evaporated. Could love really disappear this fast? It seemed it could, because I felt nothing but a desire to move on. Her plight didn't sway me anymore. Silently, I walked out of the room, got into my car, and drove away, feeling strangely content with the decision to leave it all behind. That night, I stayed at Toby and Sarah's place. They threw a lively dinner party, packed with friends and colleagues. When I got back late Sunday morning, Holly was busy with chores. As soon as she spotted me walking into the lounge, she rushed over and hugged me. I could only manage a pat on her back in response. With a forced smile, I suggested, "Why don't we arrange for your new car to be delivered? I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and she can take you to the dealership." The image of her driving back in a new Range Rover seemed to brighten her mood, and she approached me with open arms. Turning back to the kettle, I acted as if I hadn't seen her gesture. Throughout the day, Holly was overly affectionate, which only made me uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss or hug me, but I found every excuse to slip away. By bedtime, it was clear she had been crying again. As I wished her good night, she asked, "Are you coming to bed? I just need to cuddle and hear some reassurances." My response was cool and detached. "Not until you're cleared by the doctor," she shot back bitterly. "Once I'm better, I'm sure I'll find someone who wants to be with me. I have a lot of catching up to do." I chuckled to myself as I walked away. Her harsh words confirmed what I'd begun to feel more strongly each day. Any regrets from earlier had evaporated, replaced by 2 decades of built-up resentment. In the past, I might have succumbed to her emotional plays, but not this time. I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. It was my last night in this house, and it would be in that room. As I lay there looking at the altered picture of Holly with my sisters, the only emotion I felt was disdain. It was clear now. She was sweet only when she wanted something, and turned bitter when denied. Her latest words had scrubbed away any last doubts I might have had, cementing my decision to leave. I woke early Monday morning. Holly was up early too, for her 8:30 hair appointment. So I drove her into town as planned. I drove off, knowing it could be the last time I ever saw her. I feared it wouldn't be, but I was determined to make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and terminated both our contracts. Pulling over into a lay-by, I paid the penalty on my card. They informed me that the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. perfect. Next, I headed to the office to pick up my P45. As I stepped into the factory, a somber mood hung heavy in the air. It seemed news of my departure had already spread, sparking looks of unease among my colleagues as I passed by. I headed down the corridor to my office, past the coffee machine where Max and Henry were laughing with others, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I forced a smile and chirped a cheerful, "Good morning." They shot back with a joke about my wife, a running gag that had long since stopped being funny to me. "She's not doing great," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Must be something one of you gave her." Their laughter died instantly. I left them standing there, jaws hanging, as murmurs started up behind me. As I approached Olivia, she managed a half smile and looked away, perhaps a sign of newfound respect. Before I could knock, Jack swung his office door open. "I've got what you want," he snapped. "Take it and just get out." So much for respect. Inside his office, I sat down and subtly slid a recorder from under the chair into my pocket. I had him now. His indiscretions with Olivia were no secret to me. He was quick to probe. "Got another job lined up?" I paused, then said, "No, nothing yet." His smirk told me he thought I'd be begging to come back soon. "What about my final month's pay and my year-end bonus?" I asked. His response was a burst of laughter. Olivia walked in at that moment with my P45, and upon hearing my request, joined in the mirth. Deciding to turn the tables, I laughed along, making them stop and stare. "What's so funny?" Olivia asked, puzzled. "Why do you let him take advantage of you every week?" I shot back, my laughter growing louder. The room froze. Olivia's eyes went wide, and Jack's face turned a shade of crimson. His anger boiled over as he called me a scoundrel and yelled, "Get out of my office and get out of this company before I throw you out!" With a chuckle, I stood up, collected my belongings, and walked out of my office for the last time, the recorder safely tucked away. The weight of the past was finally lifting off my shoulders. I was still chuckling to myself when I got home. I unloaded the car, opened the trunk, and stepped inside the quiet house. Looking around, I thought about what I should take with me. I grabbed some Romero Brito artworks from the walls, wrapped them in plastic from the garage, and loaded them into my car. I moved through the house, gathering various personal items, and then emptied my entire wardrobe upstairs. I made sure to secure all the important documents, like the girls' birth certificates and our wedding certificate, from the safe. Climbing up the loft ladder, I retrieved my old belongings, including my university degree and family photos. In the master bedroom, I collected all the jewelry I had bought for Holly over the years, easily worth over 10,000 pounds. I also packed up all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had purchased for her. Since I'd bought them, they were mine to take. My thorough record-keeping for insurance was going to come in handy for selling these items. Once I'd finished packing, I realized I'd need a TV, so I took that, along with my movie collection and the Blu-ray player. By then, my car was overflowing. I decided to ditch all of Holly's clothes and some other non-essential items, including a few of my older garments. Anumi, my new place, would need a fresh start anyway, and the girls would be excited to help me shop for a new wardrobe. I took the best photos of me with the girls and carefully placed them in the car. There was no hurry. Holly wouldn't be back until after 2 p.m. I even took a moment to brew a cup of tea, an absolute necessity, as I see it. Next, I called the TV company to cancel the satellite, phone, and internet services. I also rang up British Gas and Southern Water to cut off the utilities. It would take a few days, but that didn't bother me. Returning to the bedroom to sit and think, my eye caught on something that sparked a daring idea, one that even scared me a bit. Holly's wedding dress was in a dusty old box on top of the wardrobe. She cherished that dress, probably more than she ever did me. I took it down, and as I did, I found our wedding album among the other photographs on the bed. I grabbed the duvet cover, scooped up everything, and stormed out to the garden. There, I dumped a pile of items, Holly's clothes included, everything I couldn't sell. I purposely left out her underwear. I didn't want any reminders. I glanced at my watch after closing up the car. Only 1:45 p.m. I called Robert Williams and let him know I'd drop off my P45 later with the night shift. He sounded pleased, and I felt good about giving him a bit of a lift. By 2 p.m., I was waiting for the inevitable call, fiddling with a can of paint thinner I found in the garage. I doused Holly's wedding dress with it, all spread out in the garden. Just as I was about to strike a match, my phone rang. I answered with forced calm. Holly's voice blasted through, demanding to know what was happening. "Oh, what do you mean?" I replied with a hint of sarcasm. She pressed on, insisting I stop playing dumb. Trying to keep cool, I asked her to chill out and explain what was up. All I got was her heavy breathing and her sister's voice in the background. Then she dropped the bomb. She'd heard that I hadn't gotten her a new car, but had sold hers instead. Might have slipped my mind to mention that," I teased. Her voice spiked with panic. "What is going on?" Keeping my voice steady despite my pounding heart, I laid it out. "From now on, if you want a car, you'll have to pay for it yourself." She exploded, a mix of confusion and anger. I simply repeated myself and casually added that I needed to tidy up the kitchen. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" she asked, her voice teetering on desperation. I said nothing. She declared we would settle this when she got home, clearly upset over what she thought was a prank. I remained silent. As she continued to scream my name, I hung up the phone and turned back to the pile in the garden. I struck the match. I stepped outside, struck a match, and watched as our past together went up in flames. I then pulled our marriage certificate from my pocket, tore it to shreds, and left the pieces on the kitchen table next to a photograph of us smiling in Disneyland, reminders of better times. I wondered if she ever looked back on those days with the same nostalgia. I slid into my car and drove away, catching a final glimpse of Holly and Jennifer rushing into the house as I reached the end of the street. With a smile, I switched off my phone and kept driving. By 4 p.m., I was in Sutton. With some time to spare, I stopped by a phone shop to set up a new mobile contract and swung by the office to sort out my P45. I also met my new secretary, Freya, who radiated professionalism, a stark contrast to Olivia. Back in my new empty flat, I brewed tea with a kettle I'd borrowed from what was no longer my home. I ordered a pizza and settled in. Checking my old phone, I found it disconnected, and I smirked, knowing Holly was now cut off too. This would give the girls a break before I reached out. I set up my sleeping bag in the lounge. The furniture would have to wait until the weekend, but for now, I enjoyed the peace. Firing up my laptop, I reviewed recordings from Jack Walker's office that confirmed his affair with Olivia. I uploaded the evidence and prepared copies on USB sticks, one for Jack's wife, Margaret, and another for Olivia's boyfriend, Peter, planning to mail them out the next day. I then called my daughter Sophie to fill her in, urging her to keep my location secret from her mother, which she had already been doing. Over the next week, I furnished my flat and began luring customers away from Walker Engineering to Sutton. Despite a few loyalists, many preferred our services, contributing to Jack's dwindling business. I relished his impending realization of why his company was suffering. With utilities cut off at my old home, Holly would soon feel the pinch of my absence. Toby was already pushing forward with selling the house, Sarah cheering him on enthusiastically. By the end of the week, for sale signs decorated the property, marking the end of an era and the start of something new. During this period, Ava reached out to me with news about Holly's situation. She had moved back to her parents' house, where she was met with disapproval due to her infidelity. Hearing that she was seething with rage towards me was oddly satisfying, though I knew this saga was far from over. Over the weekend, Toby and Sarah threw another great dinner party, giving me a brief respite from the ongoing chaos of my escape plan. Sunday brought even better news. After just a week on the market, my house received 2 solid offers. I accepted one immediately for £550,000. In preparation for closing the deal, I set up ISAs for the girls and made some investments, making sure to compensate Toby and keep a portion in cash for my safety. Protecting myself was still my top priority. Toby's update that the sale could conclude swiftly was thrilling. I wasted no time and hired a removal company to clear out my former home. Meanwhile, the girls reached out to their mother, who unleashed her fury and threats upon them. I reassured them that it would all be over soon. On Tuesday, while speaking with a new client, who had just met with Jack Walker about renewing a contract, I discovered the dire straits at Walker Engineering. The client shared that due to a massive loss of projects, the company had to lay off half its staff. He also mentioned Mrs. Walker's decision to divorce Jack after learning of his affair. While these revelations were shocking, I found myself indifferent, my focus on the commission checks rolling in. As for Olivia and her boyfriend, the outcome remained unclear, though he definitely received the USB I sent. Whether Mrs. Walker had received hers was uncertain, but the reason for their divorce seemed obvious. I wondered what her friends and family thought about her involvement with an older man. My efforts hadn't gone unnoticed at work. In recognition, I was rewarded with a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. Although I had considered treating myself, the executives at my new company were so pleased with my performance and the company's direction that they gifted me the car along with a hefty commission exceeding £30,000. As I admired my new car from my office window, a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. It was Diane, Holly's mother. Bracing myself for what was sure to be a tense encounter, my office phone rang. Freya, my secretary, told me a woman claiming to be my wife was in reception. I instructed her to tell the woman I was in a meeting and that I would be down in an hour, preparing myself for the inevitable confrontation. 3 hours had passed when I glanced out the window to see her still waiting. With a resigned sigh, I decided it was time to leave. I was ready to face her if necessary or simply slip past unnoticed. Exiting through a side door, I made my way to the car. Just as I was about to get in, tires screeched, and her car blocked my exit. She stormed out, a whirlwind of fury and disarray, dressed in what looked like her sister's old clothes, her hair a tangled mess. "You damn idiot!" she yelled, swinging a hand at me but missing by inches. Her eyes burned with rage as she demanded some kind of payback. I urged her to calm down and motioned towards the passenger seat of my new car. Reluctantly, she climbed in, her eyes widening as she took in her surroundings. Then the floodgates opened, and she spilled out her financial woes and begged me to come back. I looked at her squarely. "Given that I can't meet your needs and can't compare to your younger lovers, it seems I'm just extra baggage in your life," I said. Her plea for me to return home and forgive past grievances made me pause. "Are you serious?" I asked incredulously. She nodded earnestly, claiming she forgave me for all the upheaval. Skepticism edged my voice as I reminded her of her own infidelities and disrespect. "And you expect forgiveness?" I challenged her. "I will never be with you again," I declared, my tone ice-cold. "Maybe it's best you stay with one of your lovers." She confessed that her social circle had shifted, her friends now distant and their husbands suspicious. Despite feeling a flicker of sympathy for her admitted hardships, I stood firm. She acknowledged her mistakes had cost her dearly, admitting her life had crumbled because of her own greed and disrespect. In that moment, our shared past and its painful ending crystallized, a harsh reminder of everything we had lost and the separate paths we now faced. Despite everything, I knew it was time to move on. She pleaded for me to come back into her life, her voice trembling with desperation, claiming she had nothing left. She asked about her share of the house and mentioned needing a divorce. I calmly pointed out that she had never once said she loved me. She just needed me around, whereas I didn't need her. I admitted I had defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, revealing my deceit. Her shocked reaction confirmed what she had really come for. As she declared her desire for a divorce, she desperately claimed she still loved me. After more than 2 decades together, she acknowledged her mistakes, claiming she was being severely punished. I held firm, telling her it was an enormous, unforgivable error and I would never return to her. Her screams and sobs filled the car, echoing off the windows. I offered a proposition for a clean break, £30,000 in cash if she agreed. Suddenly, her tears stopped, and she became defiant. She accused me of lying about losing the house, insisting I was too clever for that. I acknowledged she might be right, and I found myself defending my position. "I won't give you a penny," I stated decisively. She squared up to me, fury in her eyes, and I explained that I would fight her tooth and nail. I told her she had no money, and I would shuffle my assets to make them hard to trace. I warned her that by the time her lawyer dug anything up, the legal fees would devour any potential gains. I gave her a stark choice. Take the cash now or brace for a grueling legal battle. Our eyes locked. The challenge was clear. Her anger surged as she accused me of mistreatment, asserting that she was the reason our daughters would succeed, contrasting their future with her current failures. "Take the money and leave my life," I demanded coldly. With a harsh retort, she agreed to take the cash and proceed with the divorce. "I'll see to it," I replied, my voice empty of emotion. She stormed out of the car, slamming the door so hard the vehicle rocked. Moments later, she sped out of the parking lot, leaving a cloud of dust and a slew of memories behind. The very next day, I started the divorce proceedings, naming infidelity as the main cause. A week later, I set up a meeting with Holly at our daughter's apartment. Despite having sold my house, I decided to hold off on any investments until the divorce papers were officially signed. Keeping things civil in front of Sophie and Ava was tough. I handed Holly the cash, and without much hesitation, she signed the divorce papers. I said my goodbyes to the girls, wishing Holly luck as I prepared to leave. Just then, Holly broke down into tears. It seemed a bit theatrical, likely for the benefit of our daughters, who exchanged glances that hinted they knew it too. Ava brought up seeing me the next weekend, excitedly mentioning the Coldplay concert we had planned. Her words brought me back into the moment, and I promised to confirm the details after checking with Amy, their stepmom. As I turned to leave, Holly's cries grew louder, but I chose to ignore them. Closing the door behind me, I left the drama inside, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders as I walked away. As years rolled by, the vivid threads of my life began to weave into a new, unexpected tapestry. The discovery of Holly's betrayal, a painful echo of my youth's neglect, became a catalyst for a transformative journey that started with the stark upheaval of my quiet existence. Holly, having swiftly squandered the financial windfall she had conned out of me, descended into a spiral of desperation. She moved back with her disapproving mother and amassed a mountain of debt trying to sustain the lavish lifestyle to which she had grown accustomed. Her days became a blur of credit card applications and loan denials. Alcohol became her solace, and with each passing day, she became more of a stranger to the woman I once thought I knew. Meanwhile, I embraced solitude initially, reveling in the mundane joys of bachelor life. My evenings were spent in quiet pubs or at home, tinkering with old car engines, a hobby that reminded me of simpler times. It was during one such evening, nursing a pint at a dimly lit bar, that my old college friend Jeff suggested I invest in Bitcoin. Skeptical but intrigued, I took a substantial risk. Investing £70,000 in Bitcoin back in 2017, when the price was just around £700, I watched as it soared to heights of £50,000 a unit. My bold move paid off handsomely, earning me a fortune that would forever change the trajectory of my life. Flush with my newfound wealth, I indulged in a few of life's finer pleasures. A sleek new Tesla Model S became my ride, a symbol of my success and freedom. I purchased a sprawling villa in the Madeira Islands, a sun-drenched sanctuary from the world's chaos. It was there, on those tranquil shores, that I met Anna. Anna, a vibrant and intelligent woman of 40, brought a sense of peace and adventure that had long been absent from my life. She had spent years in the corporate grind before embracing a quieter life, running a small yet successful artisanal bakery. Her spirit of resilience and her joyful embrace of each day slowly drew me in. We married amidst the lush landscapes of Madeira, our simple ceremony a testament to our shared values of love and sincerity. Within a year of our marriage, our son Lucas was born, a beacon of new beginnings. Today, as I sit on the terrace of our villa, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of hope, I reflect on the tumultuous path that led me here. The challenges I faced, the pain of betrayal, and the quiet triumphs along the way are not just remnants of a life once lived. They are the pillars upon which I built my new reality, one filled with love, respect, and genuine happiness. In this journey, I have learned that life does not always follow the plan we lay out for it, but it is always ripe with the potential for renewal. As I turn my gaze back to the horizon, I am not just looking at the closing day, but at the dawn of new possibilities, forever grateful for the chance to start anew.